scanners, post armed guards at Social Security offices, stop cars and trucks on the nation's highways and search them without warrants. This is a police state. I don't even think Hitler had a police state this thoroughgoing, or one whose foundation has been so well prepared over the last 10 years. So that's what's on my mind. You know, who's doing anything about it other than the ACLU? Now, I know you talk about it, I talk about it, but we don't have any way of actually doing anything about it, and the people seem to be accepting it.
Well, obviously, throughout history, governments that massively erode liberties in the name of safety, it's always that corrupt government system that is the true ultimate threat. Much more so than some foggy, staged, fake terror threat. But here's the $64 million question that I want your perspective on, Dr. Roberts. Why are they accelerating internet censorship and admitting it's censorship, even when the 80 inventors of the internet come out and say it's that Chinese-style, communist, selective kill switch? Why are they admitting torture, NDAA, wireless wiretapping? All of this. Why are they moving so quickly right now and so openly? What are they planning? What are they doing this ahead of?
Yes, that's a good question. Obviously, they want to shut us up and stop the only access we have to any real information, which is on the internet. So what are they planning? Well, they may be preparing for economic catastrophe. There's obviously not an economic recovery. There cannot be an economic recovery when you've moved the entire manufacturing sector offshore, along with so many of the middle-class professional skill jobs. So they've run out of the ability to keep the economy going with consumer debt. So there's no recovery. What does that mean for the deficit? It's going to be bigger. The unemployment is going to be worse. There's going to be more protests, more hardship. So, and the financial situation has not been fixed. And so the deteriorating economy will renew all the pressures on the financial system. So they're worried about all that. They obviously are planning more wars. They've got Syria in their sights. They've got Iran in their sights. Even China. They now talk about their war plans for China. So they're preparing big things for us. Economic collapse at home, more wars abroad. And they want to be sure that we simply can't use the internet and the various kinds of social information networks to get information or to oppose these developments.
That's right, Doctor. You just put your finger directly on it. That's why, and I'm not a fan of the communist Chinese, but the point is, their president came out, as you know, a month ago and said, we're preparing for war with the U.S. It looks like they're going to try to encircle us. The bases are being set up, so prepare for war with the United States. The Russians, who've not had an aggressive posture, are now having to say, okay, they're getting ready for war with us. Get ready.
It's going to be hard for the Russians to do that because they have foolishly allowed these non-governmental organizations that are funded by the American Endowment for Democracy to come in and muck around in the elections and organize street protests. And the Russians now are being seduced with membership in the World Trade Organization, so that we are I don't mean you and I, but so that Washington or whoever is pulling all the strings, so that they now have access to Russian leaders that they can purchase with money. That's the way the United States controls the world. It buys the leaders of all the other governments. Now, it's unable to do that in China and in Iran, but everywhere else it seems to have access and basically just purchases the leadership of those countries. And so that the leaders of those countries no longer represent their own country, their own people. They represent Washington's interest. I mean, why else is NATO fighting American wars in Central Asia or North Africa? There's nothing to do with NATO.
Well, they want part of that $500 billion in opium coming out of Afghanistan a year. But looking at this, now openly having the aircraft carriers, Strait of Hormuz, Iran threatening, don't bring your carriers back, U.S. troops arriving in Israel for what Israel calls a deployment, not a drill. just crazy, crazy things happening. And I think you also hit the nail on the head again when you pointed out whoever's pulling the strings. This is not America. This is not our government. This is this global corporate consortium that controls the United States just like it controls others. And so what is the end game? I mean, as an economist with what's happening in Europe, the acceleration of currency devaluations, I mean, if you were to step into their shoes, their mindset, what do you think their method to their madness is?
Well, you see, the European banks were ruined by Wall Street, all the junk securities that Wall Street sold them under false pretenses. So that damaged them. And then they now, on top of that, they have this sovereign debt crisis, you know, the Greek debt, the Italian debt. And what Washington is doing, or whoever's pulling the strings, is using the hype of the European sovereign debt crisis to strengthen the dollar, to drive down the euro and drive down gold and silver and strengthen the dollar so that they can pull off this next big war front that they've got planned. So, and the reason they're putting American troops in Israel is that if they give Israel the green light to attack Iran, and Iran retaliates, the retaliation will probably hit some of the American troops who have been stationed around Israel, and then that gives Washington a reason to join in the war.
I was about to say, I have the reporter, they're peppering them at all of the main bases the Iranians are sure to hit.
Yeah, right. So Washington can say, oh, they killed our soldiers, and be off to war. So I think that all of that is what's in the cards, and people will sit without good information, unless the whole country watches you, a few other places. They'll sit without good information and be sucked into another hoax. And it's getting more and more dangerous because I think the Chinese and the Russians didn't get too disturbed about Iraq and Afghanistan. They may have seen it as a way of letting the Americans get themselves into a mess and bankrupt the government's budget and so on. But it's now getting closer and closer to them. You see, as we've talked before, the overthrow of Gaddafi, the war against Libya, this was directed at the Chinese oil investments in eastern Libya. The setup of Syria is directed at the Russian naval base in Syria. And if they hit Iran, as it certainly seems they intend to do with all of their rhetoric, this also threatens the Chinese investments in Iran, and it is too close to Russia's borders. So they're now really risking some kind of a nuclear encounter here with the two powers, either one of which can blow away the whole world. So,
and by the way, with the Georgia conflict, as you know, sir, on 888, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it was on European TV, but not here, top story in Europe, rolled up mobile missiles and said on TV, well, okay, we're going to have to attack you with medium-range missiles because NATO aircraft were landing to back it up. And I mean, what other response do you do? And it turned out, Cy Hirsch discovered Dick Cheney was probing Russia. I mean, these are just crazy people that get off on this stuff. They already run the whole stinking world. Why do they have to just keep grabbing and grabbing and grabbing?
You know, they've been mad ever since the Joint Chiefs couldn't get John F. Kennedy in the early 60s to do a preemptive nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. The Joint Chiefs and the CIA had worked out that the Russians would not have the wherewithal to respond, but that they were quickly gaining, and that we needed to strike right away to negate Soviet power. And Kennedy nixed it. And they've been angry ever since. And they got more and more angry about the Vietnam War, about losing the Vietnam War.
Tell you what, Doctor, one more segment. Let's finish up there and look at the economy, the outlook there. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, and he's launched a new website, and it's a really nice one. We'll give you that address right now. And when we come back, excited to see his work proliferating out there. PaulCraigRoberts.org. Our sites are Infowars.com. Don't forget the network site, GCNlive.com. We'll be right back. All right, final segment with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. We'll take some more of your calls. Then we have another guest coming up, a reporter, to break down evidence of manipulation and tampering. By the way, we have Karl Rove, a clip coming up where he just talks about the fact they had a gentleman's agreement with all the key caucuses there and decided that Santorum came in second. Wait till I play that clip. I played it on the nightly news last night, but I'll get to that coming up in the next hour. Dr. Roberts, we were going to break there, and you were bringing up the fact that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Curtis LeMay, of course, L.L. Lemnitzer on record, they wanted Northwoods. And it turns out that one of their chief adjuncts became the boss of Dick Cheney, and they all learned about COG and taught George Herbert Walker Bush about how great martial law could be to bring in a takeover. Probably. Yeah.
Well, I think we kind of covered that. You wanted to get on to the economy.
Yes, just briefly. What do you see there?
Well, there can't be a recovery because the economy has been moved offshore. And we have very high unemployment. We have a huge employment deficit over the last 10 years. And so far, the dollar is holding together because the government has been operating against the bullion markets, and it's using all this hype about a European debt crisis to keep the euro down. But you've got to figure what do they do when the economy worsens, the unemployment rises, the tax revenues fall more, the deficit gets bigger. They've got to be able to sell these bonds somewhere. And if there's no market for them, then the Federal Reserve buys them. That is, it monetizes them. It creates new money to pay for them. Sooner or later, all that new money will find its way into the economy and drive up prices, or else the constant monetization of debt will cause the rest of the world to give up on the dollar. And this, in my view, is the real check on Washington's power, or on the power of those pulling the strings. At some point, there's going to be too many dollar claims for the value of the dollar to support it, and it's going to bite the dust. And when that happens, so does the power of Washington. And I think that is a more likely thing to curtail the developments that we don't like than any sort of internal political reform.
But they still have their nuclear weapons, and Israel has them, and in the final equation, that's what is being counted on here, is just holding everybody hostage.
I'm actually in the process of writing about the economic outlook for this new year. I interrupted it to come onto your program, but this article will soon be posted on my site, PaulCraigRoberts.org. And if it's not up, it'll probably be up tomorrow, assuming I'm able to finish writing it. And I'm going to go through all the aspects that have essentially destroyed the economic capability of the economy and ruined the prospect for at least 90% of the American population. And when your own government and your own corporations and your own pundits and your own economists do this to you, you really don't have a whole lot of reason to be loyal to them.
Yes, and they're building a giant armed camp against us. They treat us like they're enemies. I mean, or not even like they're enemies, like we're cattle and they're wolves. I guess we're just their prey.
You can see this very well in the attitudes of local police toward local citizens.
It is really out of control, and of course those local police are helping go along with the destruction of their own system. But a lot of police are waking up. Dr. Roberts, congratulations on launching your site. We'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you, Alex. I enjoy being with you.
Enjoy having you. Have a great new year. Into 2012. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be back in a moment. We've got a big show tonight, by the way. We're going to look at government-developed cancer viruses with the top expert. InfoWars Nightly News, 7 o'clock tonight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're into the third hour here. The jamming some calls now. More coming up in the hour. We have a guest joining us. We're going to blitz through news and get his